Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to Book Trek 2024, the Summer of Trek. This is a BookTube event created by Vin at Revenant Reads that I have been a little dilatory on over the summer. We devote the whole summer to reading Star Trek. Under the assumption, which is certainly true in my case, that Star Trek for me is synonymous with summer. There's a huge amount of Star Trek literature out there. As always with Book Trek, I meant to do a lot more videos than I did. But I want to finish out Book Trek strong, so I've been adding something Star Trek to every night's reading, whether it's a reread or new territory. Because I love reading about Star Trek, I love talking about Star Trek, and last night I threw on something that would qualify for our away missions. In addition to reading Star Trek fiction all summer long, there are two optional away missions for Book Trek. One is to read a book by someone connected with Star Trek, a memoir of some kind. And the other would be to read some work of popular science. And I did the first one last night. I reread for, I don't even know how many times I have read this book. This is from 1973 or 74. This is The World of Star Trek by David Gerrold. An energetic but middling talented science fiction author who wrote one of the greatest Star Trek episodes of them all, an episode called The Trouble with Tribbles. One of a couple of examples in the original show of the show doing comedy. The Trouble with Tribbles is meant to be funny. It's not meant to be funny in the sense of New Trek, where the jokes aren't white people racist. Isn't that funny how awful men are? But just meant to be funny. There were a couple of old shows that were meant to do that, and The Trouble with Tribbles is, I think, the most successful one. Just on balance from start to finish. Although there are bits and pieces in an episode called A Piece of the Action that I actually like better, and that I think are funnier, beat by beat. Still, The Trouble with Tribbles is a masterpiece of what you can do with comedy in science fiction. Comedy in a science fiction TV series. Keep in mind, at the time this was done, a couple of the most successful and popular television shows in all of American broadcasting were comedies when that episode was aired. It was an immense favorite. Fans loved The Trouble with Tribbles. It routinely makes the list of top 5 Star Trek episodes of all time, and it has been doing that for 60 years. And to put it mildly, that went to David Gerrold's head. Very much so. Not quite. He never got so bad as Harlan Ellison did with writing what is, in some quarters, certainly in myself, regarded as the single greatest episode of Star Trek of any franchise ever, which is The City on the Edge of Forever. But then again, David Gerrold didn't have the head start on sheer preening egotism that Harlan Ellison did, or maybe he would have got that bad. In both cases, these guys were slow to realize that this thing was going to probably outlive them, that it was going to be a major claim on immortality on their parts. In both cases, both of them resisted that in conventions, in letters to fans, in columns in print, by downplaying the achievement that they did. David Gerrold says many, many times in this book, how far below his artistic vision The Trouble with Tribbles actually fell. It had so much unrealized potential, and don't even get Harlan Ellison started. When he was alive, you could get him started in a heartbeat on how not only was City on the Edge of Forever nowhere near the gigantic crystalline vision that he had originally for the episode, which could never have been done. His original idea for the show could never have been done on network television, and he knew it. He knew it ahead of time. But he would say at the drop of a hat, not only was it far below his vision, but that it was actually probably one of the worst Star Trek episodes. You have to just ignore the creators. I would argue ignore creators at all times, but certainly ignore them when they're in a situation like this. But in the 1970s, David Gerrold, Star Trek was off the air. There weren't any prospects of it. There was talk of books, of a regular imprint of books. David Gerrold wrote one of those books. But it looked like a phenomenon that had come, blazed a trail, and then gone. And David Gerrold was appreciative of what it was. I think most Star Trek fans were. We were bereft. Suddenly it was gone, and it looked like it would never be back. So he wrote this book. Went around, talked to a lot of people. This is a nonfiction work about the stories behind Star Trek. It is one of 3, a great trilogy of nonfiction works that were written more or less while the echoes were still strong of the show itself. Nothing really beats that trilogy for readability and also for access. because this is the stars when they thought this was just one other show on their resume and that it had come and gone. So they weren't talking about it in the ways of a treasured cultural icon that they would later on. He talks with all the cast. He gets all sorts of long quotes from everybody. And it's a necessary corrective to a lot of that later hagiography, because here you're getting the cast as working actors. Oh, maybe did a Western last year. They might do a hospital drama next year. They had this weird science fiction show that they did. They gave it their best. They were all workmanlike in one way or another. Some more talented. We're talking about the core crew of actors, some more talented than others. But all able to turn in an absolutely perfect TV actor job. All of them could do that. I would argue that in the original cast, I might take heat for saying this, but I think that that in the original cast, as luck would have it, or maybe extensive vetting and lots of cast of part swapping would have it, the three best actors in the original show got the three main roles. I will die on the hill of saying that William Shatner is a terrific actor. I think that he has proved that as amply as he needs to. In role after role after role, I think he has amply proved that. Leonard Nimoy, I don't think there's any reason to doubt, although we don't get much in the way of evidence. Unfortunately, he was pretty happy to just cash those Mr. Spock checks. And also the least sung of the three, but also, in my mind, one of the more talented, DeForest Kelley. However you might estimate it otherwise, I think the three best actors got the three plumbest roles, but Gerald talks to everybody here and gives everybody a lot to say about the show. You have to listen very carefully when you're reading through those anecdotes and a lot of his bridging exposition. You have to listen very carefully in his case, and also Harlan Ellis's case. You have to listen very carefully for what he's not saying. You have to pay attention. All right, here are two anecdotes in a row. They're really juicy, but wait a minute. The same person is missing from both those anecdotes. Everybody else is talking, but and this person talks in all the other anecdotes, but they're completely missing from these two, even though the anecdotes in question don't have anything to do with them. Why is that? Is because when David Gerald went to them to talk about this anecdote, they said that never happened, and their reliability is unimpeachable. So he just left them out because he doesn't want to leave the anecdote out. You have to be careful. You have to read this cannily. Same thing with Star Trek Lives, for instance. You have to read them cannily, and with your wits about you. But boy, oh boy, is it good. One of you, a viewer of this channel, actually sent me this paperback. I hadn't had a paperback of this in forever, and didn't know how much I missed it until I got it in one of these big grab bag boxes that some of you send me of stuff. A couple of you send me grab bag boxes of stuff that you get at library sales and thrift shops, and one of you go out and about to actual flea markets. You get books for yourself, but you also set aside books for me. And a few of you who do that for me on a regular basis have stipulated, you don't mean to be a jerk about it, and I agree. I love you people, so I'm gonna accept your conditions. But a couple of people who do that regularly have said, I don't want you to film this. You can write to me and tell me what you thought of all the things that I put in here, but I don't want you to make a video out of it. I don't know why some people are like that, but they are. And then other people don't care or actually want a haul video. And one of you sent me this, and that's what I reread last night, is this paperback, which held up just fine. It's got lots and lots of black and white photos of all the people involved. That is, of course, the great bird of the galaxy himself. That's Gene Roddenberry with incredible sideburns, and there is the mastermind behind the original series, Dorothy Fontana, who's, if you come across great scripting or great script doctoring, it's almost certainly going to be her, who's taking your crystalline beauty of an episode that couldn't possibly be filmed and making it into something that's worthy of an Emmy. If there are nips and tucks here and there along the line, it's probably going to be her. She also went on to write in that burgeoning line of original Star Trek novels. So I had a great time rereading this last night. It doesn't feel like rereading at this point, because I've read, when these original books came out, we had nothing. So original fans just gobbled these things up, just gobbled them up. I bought, I don't know, the first paperback that I got of this thing, I got when it came out, which was, when? I want to say 1973. Uh, it surprised me. Of course, there was no grapevine, there was no internet, there was no way to know that this was coming. So it surprised me. I got it. I read it until it pulled apart. I read it so eagerly and so often that I tore it apart, and went back and got another copy. And it was, oh, there's a little sticker over this thing, but it wasn't cheap. It was like $2. I went back and got another copy. I reread that one, and if I remember correctly, it was the second or the third copy of this book that I got that my beagles just destroyed. They saw how much attention I was giving it, and I left it down on a coffee table or on the floor of a room, and they just pounced on it and tore it to pieces. I had a little Shrek of a cover, I had a little piece of a page here and there, the top of Nichelle Nichols' face or something like that. So I had to go out and buy it again. I just kept buying it over the years. I'm amazed. When I got this in the mail from one of you, I was amazed that I'd gone so long without having it. But I reread it and loved it. It is full of stuff that we had not had in any systematic form before. The seasons broken down by episodes with all of the information involved, who directed it, who the stars were, what the names of their characters were, which oftentimes wasn't clear in the episode, and little production stills from each episode. So that was wonderful to go through that all over again. Of course, you're going to know here that I got the bug for Star Trek at the beginning. I got the bug when it was airing on national TV, and I've been a Star Trek fan of the original show ever since. There have been other Star Trek franchises that I came to love. Ear-piercing siren. There have been other Star Trek franchises that I came to love, especially Voyager. Star Trek Voyager, which doesn't usually rank highly with other Star Trek fans. But for me, nothing comes close to the original. And I was blown away. Years ago, I went up to Mark Richardson's house up in Vermont, the old farmhouse up in Vermont, and he put on the big plasma screen TV the new redone episodes of the original show with special effects added in, crisp lines, shadows added in, just an absolutely gorgeous restoration and enhancement procedure, which just boggles my mind. Still, it boggles my mind. So that just made me love them all the more. Suddenly they look like Star Trek, like the visual standard of the other four of the original show, of the other four original franchises. So no matter what other Star Trek I watch, and there are moments from all the Star Trek franchises of the original batch that I just love. There are moments that I absolutely love. I'd rank them in my top 10 Star Trek moments. But an overall show, it's this one. It's the original show. Which made last night's reread all the more interesting because it had been a long time since I reread this book. And Star Trek has grown in its cultural importance in that time. There are now more Star Trek shows in current production than there have ever been. No one watches them. They're on dedicated cable shows, and they are made for an audience of 12 blue-haired psychos on Twitter. So a general audience doesn't watch them. But nevertheless, they are being made. A huge amount of money is being pumped into them. They are not let out of the Tyrannosaur paddock. They're not let out into the competitive world. There's no new Trek movie because fans would walk out. They wouldn't wait until it was over and then say, "Oh boy, that wasn't good." They'd just walk out in the first 5 minutes. So and that would make the news. So there isn't anything like that. But aside from those shows, the original batch of 5 franchises have some fantastic moments. Just every one of them has incredible moments, one way or another. It lodged in perhaps substandard episodes, or even lodged in really good episodes. But the original show has my heart, and the echoes of that original show have grown over the years. They grow all the time, and that's an element in rereading this after so much time that I hadn't taken into consideration, and it really showed in the final part of this book, which has always been my favorite part of this book. It's called Star Trek Analyzed, where David Gerrold, I think the subtitle is something like an unrealized, an unfulfilled dream, because he takes his dissatisfaction with, oh, well, they could have done this, or they could have done that, they could have done more of what I say. He takes that dissatisfaction to operatic heights in the final segment, where he stops interviewing the cast and just analyzes the show. But aside from that, they should have listened to me, old man griping, his analysis is incredibly interesting of that original show when there wasn't anything else. Long before there was any kind of social or cultural accretion, he analyzes the show itself, and I might not agree with him on a lot, but I love it. Oh my, the final part of this book is the best part. It's so enjoyable to read. So that is my book trek report for today. It's actually an away mission. It's nonfiction about Star Trek as we wind down Book Trek 2024. We've just a couple of days left. So who knows what it'll be tonight? I floated a couple of possibilities in yesterday's video, got overwhelmed. And the overwhelming email response for days now has been one particular Star Trek novel, my favorite Star Trek novel. I think it was 6 of you in different emails yesterday. 6 of you made the same point in the midst of other points, made the same point about how yesterday I did a video on a Star Trek novel called Wagon Train to the Stars. And I did a video on that book 2 years ago. I even linked it on yesterday's video. And 6 different people made a variation on the point of, I watched that video 2 years ago. I watched this video. They aren't the same. I would happily watch another video on this book. So you can tell us a little more about your favorite Star Trek novel. You don't have to worry about repeating yourself. That's awful tempting. It's always awful tempting for me to talk about my favorite Star Trek novel. Maybe I'll do that at the end of Book Trek 2024. But who knows what it'll be tonight. This was great, but I feel like reading something... I don't feel like ending Book Trek just on old material. I feel like reading something I haven't read before. There are plenty of Star Trek novels out there I haven't read. So maybe I'll do that for tonight. I will report back. I will give you my log report tomorrow. So I'll wrap this up for now, and I will see you then. Thank you, BookTube.